flyer, right? What can you not represent as an image?
Cost.
What's that?
Cost.
The cost, right? Because you got money. You got to have numbers in there. What else can you not represent graphically?
Menu.
Okay, menu, because those are letters. All right. Address, phone number. Okay, those things you have to use letters. You have to use numbers, right? But there are other things that you can use to represent graphically, right? And when I say graphic, it is a symbol. Sometimes it's an icon, which is that thing looks like what it represents, or sometimes it could also be symbolic. Remember, symbolic, there's no direct connection. You have a red rose. Red rose means what? What is it? Love. Okay, you got to put that little accent on there, right? Red rose means love, okay? So you can use a red rose to symbolize, okay, this is a special that we're having during Valentine's Day, for example, though it's past, or post-Valentine's Day special, right? So that is symbolic. An icon, you can represent several ways. Now, again, icon are things that have a direct connection between what they're representing. And you have a particular and universal. Now, you see this, particular can be also specific. You see this when you look at graphic representations on web pages. A specific image for the home page, let's say, for a home, would be an actual photograph of somebody's home, right? So I'll just make this here, photo of home, right? I wrote it in there, but I can't represent, I can't draw that really well, right? The universal representation of that is that which has the least, uses the least amount of lines, okay? So, what is the universal representation of home? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, okay? Just about everybody on the entire planet would identify that as home or a house, okay? Now, you can go anywhere in between here. You have the whole gamut. You can take this picture. If it's in color, you can make it black and white, all right? That brings it closer to this way. You can posterize it, all right? You can take out some elements of it, okay? You keep going this way, all right? That's making it less and less and less specific. So, depending on your audience, if you have a very broad audience, okay, what do you want to create? A specific or a universal icon? Yes? Universal, okay, because you want more people to identify with that. If you have a very specific audience, right, you have specific, right? You have a certain audience, you have people that you are, let's say, doing something for a real estate agent, all right, and you want to target people who make 200,000 plus, okay? You can use a certain type of home, all right? If you're trying to target people that make $50,000 to $80,000, you're not going to use that same home. Even though it's still specific, you're going to use a different one. So your audience determines not only whether you use specific or universal, but when you're in a specific, what type of specific graphic or image that you're going to use, okay? Next, you want to ask, what aspects must I represent textually, right? That's a text, and we've talked about that. Addresses, names, all right? Phone numbers, web addresses, okay? You can play around sometimes if you're trying to, do something interesting and get people to really engage their minds. You can ask questions using symbols or even some icons. But again, in this day and age of instant access and so much information, we are bombarded with it. Do you really want to get people to stop and have to figure out, okay, what does this flower plus dog plus cat equal? What's that question? What's that sentence? So I answer this question now. When you get to define what you must represent textually, you also have to consider the different typefaces that you use, all right? In other words, what different types of font. When you are producing something in print, it is easier, all right? This is what the research says. It is easier to read serif font, okay? Anybody know what serif font is here? What is serif font? Right. Serif font, all the characters have serifs, or these little squiggles on the end. All right, Times New Roman, Georgia, all right, those are called serif fonts. In print, those are easier to read. On a screen, whether it's a television screen, a film screen, or a computer monitor, you want to use sans serif font, like Arial, Tahoma, Helvetica. It's easier to read these. Just check websites. Those that are really top-notch websites, and we'll take a look at some of these on Friday, all right? They will use primarily, not exclusively, primarily, okay? The other thing is decorative font, like brush script fonts. There's one called Curls. I mean, you've seen all these different types of fonts. Those do not appear well on screen. Doesn't mean that you can't use them. It's just that you have to make sure you have good contrast between the font itself and the background, because the little curls, that's the same thing that happens here. These things disappear, okay? They kind of fade away when you're on screen. So this is serif and sans. Sans means without. Sans serif font, right? In print, serifed. On screen, sans serifed. Now, let me qualify that. Does that mean that you never use sans serif font in print? No, right? If you want something to really stick out, you use that, okay? And I can go on with that, but I'm going to move on to something else about text. Text, you also have to consider whether you do italics, whether you do bold, the size of the text, the spacing of the text, the kerneling. Kerneling is the space between the letters, okay? Whether you go horizontal, vertical, whether you go into the z-axis, which would be 3D. All these things are critical, right? You have X and Y, and then Z is going in, right? So you can do that with word art, right? You can take word art things, you can rotate them. In some of the more advanced applications, you can mess around with font tremendously, all right? Photoshop and so on, all right? Once you've got all that stuff, all that information together, then you create thumbnails. And thumbnails are the rough draft. Now, again, we're going to take a look at some of these on Friday, examples. Thumbnails are very simply how something looks like on the final format in terms of the space that it's taking up. So it's not very specific. So if I were doing several different types of business cards, these would be thumbnails. Here's my logo, all right? Here's our specifics. That's one way, okay? Right? Another way would be, here's my logo, and maybe I have a picture over here. These are thumbnails, all right? Then I have another one. Maybe I have as a watermark my logo, and then I have information like this. Those are all thumbnails. What this is telling visually to the client, okay, this is what it looks like if you just looked at it at a distance. You're going to have a graph. Of course, that's not a good representation of a logo. Let's say, all right, whatever. Doesn't have to be really clean. Again, spatial relations between the different elements in the format. You do about 20, 30 of these, and they're just really rough, very, very rough sketches. Then from there, your client chooses 3 comprehensives. Take this, maybe you can combine thumbnails. I want you to make comprehensive of this one, comprehensive of this, comprehensive of that. Now the comprehensive, then you add color. You start getting specific with what the logo actually looks like. You may not have the exact wording, okay, the exact words, but you do have the exact type of font that you're going to use, the size of the font, all right, and where it's placed on there. All right, so that's the difference between thumbnail and a comprehensive. All right, again, thumbnail, very rough. Comprehensive is a presentable review draft with color, with font, with the logo designed. And then you do, out of those comprehensive, the client will say, okay, let's take this element of that one, this one of this one, and this one of this one, and I want you to make a final draft. And your final draft, you always submit it to your client in the final format. So if it's a brochure, you hand them a brochure. If it's a PowerPoint presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. If it's going to be on a website, you got to put it on the website. You want them to see it in their final format. Once they've approved that, then you have to make sure that you turn in to them the disk, the copy-ready image, whatever it is, so that they can replicate it and duplicate it for their own sake, their production.